I would like to welcome members to the hybrid meeting of the Civic Licensing Committee and remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking, and please raise your electronic hand should you wish to speak. Please do not speak during items unless I invite you to speak. For members present, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Thank you all. If we start with item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Convener. There's no apologies intimated. Councillors Gavin Nicholl, Jill Scott have joined the meeting remotely, and all other members of the committee are present in the chamber.
Thank you. We'll move to item 2, declarations of interest and statements of transparency. Are there any? Councillor Whiteside.
It's only a statement of transparency. The business at item 5, the licence for a house in multiple occupation, is in my ward, and the owner is, and the applicant is known to me, but we've had no contact and I don't have any interest to declare.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteside. With that noted, if we move to item 3, taxi and private hire drivers exemption from duties, report number 12923 on pages 3 to 5. Jennifer, do you want to introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Convener. So there have been changes as a result, well, there have been statutory changes to the Equality Act 2010, which impact on taxi drivers and private hire drivers. One of the duties arising from these changes is that the local authority also produce and publish a list of wheelchair accessible vehicles, and this will have an impact on those. The changes to the Act will also impact on the drivers of these wheelchair accessible vehicles in particular. Excuse me. The changes brought about by the Act principally affect wheelchair users, other disabled passengers, and excuse me, those that wish to accompany them on their journeys. The duties which are now imposed by the Act are with respect to providing assistance, mobility assistance, and to these passengers, and in particular wheelchair accessible vehicle drivers will now be required to carry passengers in their wheelchair to provide other mobility assistance for free. As I say, this will be a duty on these drivers once the council has published its list of wheelchair accessible vehicles. We do already have the list. It hasn't yet been published, but once it's published, there'll be a legal obligation with criminal penalties for failure to comply on these drivers. However, it is recognised in terms of the legislation that there may be instances where these drivers are unable to provide this assistance. And in this instance, they will be able to apply to the local authority for an exemption certificate. So this report is to bring that background to yourselves with a view to making arrangements for these exemption certificates so that applications can be received, considered, and where appropriate, granted. The exemption primarily relates to medical reason or perhaps some physical impediment which would prevent a driver from being able to fulfil the obligations in terms of the Act. The recommendation, therefore, in the report is to note these exemptions, to agree that medical opinion should be required before such an exemption should be authorised. And also, given that it may be useful for a driver who themselves might be disabled to have an exemption quickly and not to be prejudiced by that, it's suggested, recommended here that this decision is delegated, and the suggestion is either to the convener and vice convener, or alternatively the Director of Legal and Democratic Services. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. Reading through the report on page 4, note on 4A part B, an assistance dog, sections 168 and 170 make provision about the carrying of assistance dogs. Sorry, it's page 4 of the combined papers. With reference to, excuse me, it's 3.1 of the report, part 4A, and then B for assistance dogs. So I presume that a medical exemption would be if someone had an allergy to dogs or something, then obviously it would be difficult to carry them in the vehicle. But then similar, there's no mention in here of emotional support animals. So are they sort of included within this legislation, or is it specifically just assistance dogs?
I perhaps should have emphasised that this particular exemption that we're referring to here doesn't relate to the assistance dogs, that is dealt with separately. My understanding was that it was primarily aimed at guide dogs as opposed to other forms of assistance dogs, but you'll see, as you've identified there, that there is provision here, but this was already in place. This exemption was already in place and has not been changed by the Equality Act, which is why I'm distinguishing between which was not made by, so it wasn't brought in by the changes that I'm referring to here, the recent changes into the Equalities Act. Sorry, I don't know if that's answered your question. I don't know if I fully heard it, to be honest. Apologies.
Yeah, it's a complicated one because obviously the legislation is already in place, but with regards to this paper for the medical exemptions for drivers, depending on how much level of assistance they're able to give their passenger, because there's obviously possibly going to be an assistance dog that forms into the equation. So would the medical exemption include things like if someone has an allergy to dogs or to cats in that form, would that make up part of the exemption as well?
Yes, my understanding was that the provisions which were already in place and in relation to assistance dogs would include, for example, somebody who had an allergy to these dogs. In fact, I can't imagine another sort of instance where that would actually, when an exemption would actually be applicable in relation to assistance dogs. I may be out of line there, but that certainly what would immediately come to mind, a particular allergy to dogs.
Is that okay, Councillor Gregg? Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
You will go.
No other questions? Don't see any hands up. Okay. If we move then to the recommendations, recommendation 1 is that we note the exemption from providing mobilities assistance in terms of section 165E and 166 of the Equalities Act 2010. Are we happy to note? Thank you. Number 2, agree that medical opinion shall be required before such an exemption shall be authorised. Do we agree? And the 3, delegate authority to one or other of the convener and vice convener or the Director of Legal and Democratic Services to grant applications for exemption from the abilities assistance duties. Now, I'll ask for opinions on that. My own opinion, which I'll put in, is that I see no reason why it can't go to the director rather than having to come to the convener and vice convener. Are there any other? Councillor Gregg?
My personal opinion was I'd like to see that both yourself, the convener and vice convener, take up more of the authority, because I think through a lot of the papers, there's on almost every paper that come to either committee or council, we delegate so much power away from us as councillors. And I think ultimately that's what we're elected here to do, is to make those decisions. So I'd be in favour of yourself and the vice convener taking on that authority.
Any other comments? Councillor Whiteside.
I would agree with yourself, convener, and be content that the authority was delegated to the director in this instance.
Thank you. Councillor Durno.
The only comment I would make would be that I'm wanting to know if there's going to be any increased tariffs on part of the taxi driver regarding this, because I have been told from wheelchair users that at the moment, as soon as they access a taxi, the tariff goes up to tariff 2. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be more, if they have to give more assistance maybe than they've done previously, that they might want to increase the tariffs, and obviously that's not very great. It's just a conversation I think might need to be worked out to see if there's any problems there.
I think we just heard, if I heard correctly, Jennifer, that they can't charge for that service. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I thought. They couldn't do it, but it was just in case some decided they would. So, okay, thank you.
Yes, thanks, convener. If you're content that this power be delegated to the head of Legal and Democratic, then I'm content to support Europe on that. Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Nicholl, I didn't see your hand up there.
No problem. Thank you, convener. I would like to agree with Councillor Rose.
Okay, thank you. So we have a seconder there, and a seconder for my own is Councillor Braze. Just bear with us, we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, convener. Motion is to delegate authority to the convener and vice convener, and the amendment proposed by Councillor Meehan, seconded by Councillor Braze. The amendment is to delegate authority to the Director of Legal and Democratic.
I think that's the other way around. Mine's is the
Sorry.
director, yeah.
Apologies. I'll do that again. Sorry, the motion proposed by Councillor Meehan, seconded by Councillor Braze, is to delegate authority to the Legal and Democratic Services, and the amendment is proposed by Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Gavin Nicholl, to delegate authority to the convener and vice convener. Please vote motion or amendment. Councillor Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Melville?
Motion.
Councillor Braze?
Motion.
Councillor Clark? Councillor Dunno? Councillor Fotheringham?
Amendment.
Councillor Gregg?
Amendment.
Councillor Gavin Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Jill Scott?
Amendment.
Councillor Beth Whiteside? The motion, 6 votes, and Amendment 4. The motion is carried.
Thank you. We'll move now to item 4, which is the exclusion of public and press. The committee are asked to note that the public and press will be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following item, so as to avoid disclosing confidential information in terms of section 50A2 and 3B to the Local Government Scotland Act 1973.
John, can you stop the line?